Hello, welcome to From Caracas. I'm Laura Prada. Today we'll be talking with Gabriella Killpack. She's a member of the Freedom Socialist organization and a timber truck driver and member of a labor delegation here in Venezuela. With her, we'll be talking about what she's seen in this visit to Venezuela, her meetings with some labor workers here in Caracas, and of course, what is happening in the United States currently due to the fact that we are on electoral year. Welcome, Gabriela, to From Caracas.
Thank you. I'm happy to be here.
Gabriela, tell me, what do you specifically do in your organization, in your timber, as a timber truck driver?
So in the Freedom Road Socialist Organization, we're a revolutionary socialist organization rooted in people's movements like the labor movement, oppressed nationality movement, anti-war, etc. And what I do is I just organize among my coworkers. I have a normal job like anybody else, but I try to organize my coworkers and, grow and learn kind of like the reality of like society, I think.
This is your second time in Venezuela. How has this experience been, and what were you expecting to see? Because you came last year in August. Did you saw any difference, your expectations when you came for the first time and your expectations now?
Right, yeah, no, so the first time I came, I was absolutely blown away. We were in a march of 50,000 people last August, and it was called just the day before, and there was thousands and thousands of people in the street, just ready to like defend and like support their country. But so we went to a rally in response to the opposition's rally. I believe it was yesterday, when they burned the voting machines, and then the opposition said that they were going to have a rally, a far-right rally. And so we came to the one in support of Venezuela, in support of the government, and there was over 600,000 people there. People were dancing, they were chanting, they were like proud of their country and proud of a part of this process that's happening in Venezuela. And it's incredible to see, there's nothing really like it in the United States, but I take inspiration from it and I want to bring that to the United States,
So what are you actually doing in this visit to Venezuela?
So we met with transportation workers. We met at a factory where they make tablets and computers. We went to the National Elections Council, and we learned about the Venezuelan process and elections and how important that is to your democracy. But yeah, it's been absolutely incredible so far, particularly the National Elections Council. Like the amount of like elections and how seriously you take it here in Venezuela, and that there is a specific what is it called? The judicial legislative. It's another side of part of the government, very important part, and that. We spoke with the president of the National Council of Elections, and she was telling us that they will even go so far to like time people to see how long it's taking them to vote, what might be making the process slower, and they work very hard to make it as accessible as possible, which is interesting because in the United States, they don't work to make, or they don't, work to make elections and voting accessible for the people. There can be very confusing information depending on where you are.
We are going to go a little bit deeper on that part,
absolutely.
But I want to ask you some other questions related to Venezuela. When you came this time to Venezuela, you were saying recently we had a massive rally, just called from one day to another.
Yes.
That experience, when you leave that, how do you bring that experience back to the United States? How do you explain to people, how is it possible that people go there and they're happy and they're chanting, they're dancing? It's like they're on a party.
Yeah, so part of the reason we're here is to see the truth of Venezuela, and so we can come back to the United States and refute the lies that Donald Trump and the United States says about Venezuela, the mass media in the US. So exactly that, you know, we come here, we see people happy and healthy. We don't see starving people in the streets. We don't see a civil war, and we don't see any violence. I haven't seen any when I am here, and none of my friends have either. We see the opposite. We see people flourishing, people happy, people excited to be a part of the process that's going on, the socialist process that's going on in Venezuela. And we think it's so inspiring. You know, we just tell people exactly what we see. We tell them the truth, because this is the truth. You know, what's happening and what's being told in the US are lies. And we want to bring back that, and then not only tell people the truth, but also bring people into the fight to stop the sanctions, the US sanctions in Venezuela.
In fact, one of the latest sanctions coming from the United States is focus on the transport sector in Venezuela, and specifically to Conviasa. Have you met with Conviasa workers, or what have you experienced from that? What have they told you?
Yeah, so we met with Conviasa workers, and I think that's a very important point you just raised, because Trump and the US sanctions have violated their right to work. And I think it's very important that we know like the particulars of these sanctions, and so we can like tell people about them. You know, like these are people who are union members just like us in the United States. And I think it's criminal, it's a crime that these US sanctions are stopping them to, or not allowing them to work.
Probably one of the most interesting or highlighting things that we can say about the transport sector here in Venezuela is that President Maduro actually was a unionist at a transport sector. He was a union leader while he was a bus driver. But that, based on that experience, do you think that it matters for the transport sector here in Venezuela, and that's maybe an example how far they can go and how important is the work that they do?
I think that is such a beautiful example that you just raised. It's like honestly kind of funny being here, because just talking about my experiences for as short as we have, it makes me so happy and excited. And that the Venezuelan people have a president who was a worker and a union member is, again, like inspiring, you know. And I think it's Venezuela should be an example to the American people. You know, I don't think American workers understand that, like, well, they don't understand yet, you know, and we're going to bring back, but that like how much we have in common, and how much of like a flourishing, beautiful country Venezuela is.
It's not common that a president comes from a unionist history and be also a leader among the union workers. But based on that, also, do you think that maybe there's a power behind that discriminates in a way people that come from the unionist sector? For example, I want to kind of introduce now to talk about the socialist ideas Bernie Sanders is introducing, but taking into consideration that there are powers that are against the idea that union leaders come that up to power, like for example Maduro has come to position where he's president of a nation. And now we have someone who is proposing socialist ideas, and he's trying to put it into the American society, like Bernie Sanders. Is the society ready for that kind of leadership, a leadership that comes from the workers?
I think that Americans are ready for it, but I think that while Bernie Sanders, I love the guy, and I think that many of the parts of his platform are very important, like Medicare for all and his workplace democracy plan. I think it would help us so much, you know. But taking a slogan that he often says is, you know, not me, us. And I think it's the working class people, the people on the bottom who need to organize. And I don't necessarily think that Bernie Sanders is a socialist, but I think that socialism is on the rise. Real socialism is on the rise in the United States. And people, it's not a dirty word anymore. It's not a bad word. It's something that people are excited about. It's common, you know. Even 7 years ago, when I first became a socialist, it wasn't even the same 7 years ago, you know. It's just it's totally different now.
But is the American society ready to hear that term, socialism? Because media keeps calling it like the ghost that is going through Latin America, the ghost going through Europe. They call these Cold War times every time they mention this socialist reference that Bernie Sanders is doing.
I think America's ready for the term socialism, and I think they're ready for socialism. I don't think that people are as nervous about it, and I think that people are really seeing that the system isn't working for us. It's going backwards, you know, and like people's movements are on the rise. Like teacher strikes have been like just went across the country. UAW went on strike. It's like Black Lives Matter against the police killings, the racist police killings in the US. People are realizing that they have a right to determine how society runs, that like working people should have a say in, we move society, so we should be able to decide how society like functions instead of being I think like exploited and oppressed by like these billionaires, you know, the ultra rich of society.
But as society keeps rising, the labor movements keep rising. Is that the alternative the U.S. society actually needs?
Is socialism?
Yes.
I absolutely think so. I mean, we'll have to build it. I don't think it's necessarily going to happen under Bernie Sanders, but I do think there are like positives and like very good things about Bernie Sanders. But yeah, I think the U.S. does need socialism, and we have to be willing to fight for it, and I see it in our future, really.
Do you think there is a way that possibility for Bernie Sanders to come to power, to show people that they don't have to be afraid about socialism, that there is an alternative to capitalism, to the actual social model that under which United States is living? Is there a possibility for Bernie Sanders and this proposal of socialism, of an alternative to the capitalist model that United States has been throughout its history?
So I don't think that Bernie Sanders is a socialist, and I don't think that if he became president, he would be able to bring forward socialism. I think socialism would certainly have to happen from the bottom up. I think, again, Bernie Sanders is great, but I think he is in more terms, if you like take a step back out of the US, more of like a centrist or like a little bit on the left. You know, he's calling for very basic things that many countries have, like universal health care or, you know, paid maternity leave, child care, lowering the cost of university and education, and like canceling student debt. Like these are like very, very basic things, and I think by him calling that, it really represents like the desperate situation the US is in right now. You know, like many of us young people don't see a future for us. We go, like many people go to college and they can't find a job or a decent paying job anywhere. You know, like my family lives in poverty. I lived in poverty for most of my life until I got this union job. And really, like, union jobs are the only way that young people like myself are ever going to get out of poverty and ever going to have a career.
How is to be a unionist in United States?
I think it's great. I think it's really beautiful. The United States has a very rich union labor history, and I'm happy, very happy and proud to be a part of it. I think you know, there's some places it can be a little bit more difficult. Like where I'm from, it's a more like conservative place, and you know, people may not know like the rich like labor history or like their rights. But I think that's also part of what's great about being a trade unionist, is that you go to work and you educate and you work in solidarity with your coworkers. You work together to fight for not only you know, the small things to like make our lives a little better, but to fight for a stronger union, to fight for the working class, and then hopefully to fight, to transform society.
You were saying that unions have been the alternative for young people like yourself to understand better, to get a job that kind of opened your eyes to the world, to the alternative that there are in the world. How is for a young people to become a young person, to become a union member?
I mean, I'll say really quickly, the union movement was in decline for a long time, and now it's coming back on the rise for the first time in decades. And how young people become union members, I mean, I think like you can join a union that already like exists in a workplace that represents. People can create unions in their own workplaces, which is very exciting. You band together with your coworkers and you start a union. It can be difficult, but I think it's exciting, and I think a lot of what we do is difficult, but it's exciting, and it's important. This project we're doing in the U.S. and in Venezuela, you face many difficulties, but you persevere and you fight. And I see these are things that I'm thinking about when I think of Venezuela. It inspires me when I think of going back home and how I'm going to be working.
What kind of views, experiences have you been able to take, and you're interested in showing your co-workers, your co-unionists, about the Venezuelan experience?
Yeah, I think the rally was incredible. I really enjoyed that. And then we heard a presentation from a human rights organization on the sanctions and the effects of the sanctions. And then also we toured a factory that makes tablets and computers. And what I think is so amazing, and what I want to tell my coworkers, is how even under US sanctions, Venezuela is growing, is like developing, is like moving forward. Like nothing can hold Venezuela down. So that's what I want to share with them, along with, the truth, like exposing the lies. But I want to get the exposing the lies part out really quick because I think it's really silly, of course it's fake. Of course it's a lie. But yeah, and then, get to talking about like these programs that I've been able to like witness and learn about, programs that we don't have in the United States that I think would be incredible if we do,
Maybe are those programs that are here in Venezuela part of a socialist future in the United States?
They could be, like taking these programs and then...
And maybe develop them
possibly.
there.
Yeah.
So also based on that experience and your work as a unionist, which is today the role of unions around the world?
Today, the role of unions around the world, I think to fight for the working class, fight for our people, but also like take it to the next level and like fight to transform society, and fight to like stand for other unions, other workers, not only just trade unionists, but workers across the country. And like what I want to see and what I would like to build in the United States is fighting, like making my union a fighting union, but then having it stand for Venezuela, having it making a call against the U.S. sanctions in Venezuela, and saying, hey, like the Venezuelan people get to decide how they want their country to go, and like we don't want the U.S. in it, and taking up like an anti-imperialist
like
struggle.
your badge.
Oh yes, I got this at the Foreign Affairs today.
Wow. The sanctions. How do you explain the U.S. sanctions on Venezuela? Have you been able to understand them? Have you been able to actually comprehend how they're actually affecting the Venezuelan people, and which boundaries it sets for the society to keep moving forward?
Yeah, so I think there's always more for me to learn about the sanctions, because it's quite expansive. But I thought, you know, like we toured a hospital with like the Cuban Venezuela mission, and they were talking about the difficulty of like the sanctions with getting some of like medical equipment in, but like they still like are able, like I said, to like persevere and like, you know, make it through. But yeah, no, it's been, especially on this trip, I think very eye-opening to me, how badly the U.S. sanctions have affected Venezuela. But I just want to say again and again that it's like incredible how Venezuela has been able to like continue developing and like expand. Not to undermine how bad the sanctions are, but yeah. We actually had a protest in my city against the U.S. sanctions in Venezuela.
You are from Minnesota?
I'm from Utah.
From Utah.
Yeah, we had a protest in my city against the sanctions. And it was a hands-off Venezuela. That's what we chanted.
Quite an experience.
I'm so thankful to be here.
No, we thank you for having a little bit of your time to share with us to share your experience with us here from Caracas. How it's Venezuela seen from abroad, specifically from United States, and how unions, trade unions, labor unions, I must say, bind together and share experiences and bring forward that feeling of hope that Venezuela has, and that self-conscience that they have to keep moving forwards, even though United States keeps imposing sanctions. Thank you very much for sharing your time with us.
Thank you.
Like this, we come to the end of this from Caracas. Today we were speaking with Gabriella Killpack. With her, we've been talking about union movements here in Venezuela, of course, how they are seen from abroad, and the future of union workers in the world. Thank you for being with us. Until next time, thank you for watching.